We're going to be reviewing the information on TENS. And so we have our equipment here. Remember, one of the first things you need to do when you're going to be applying TENS is get your equipment together. So we have our TENS unit, we have our wires, and we have some electrodes as well. Most of the handheld TENS units are all going to be battery operated, so you need to know where the batteries are at in terms of replacing. In this particular case, this is a BioStim M7. The batteries are located in the lower area here, and this uses AA. Some of them may use 9-volt batteries, some of them are AA's. In order to access the top, we're going to pop that open in through here. A way to tell whether it's working or not, obviously, is you just turn on or off. So we need to make sure that our unit is working. And as I said, you can do that very easily by turning on and off. We'll talk about settings in a minute. So remember, with your wires, you've got your two ends, and then you've also got the end that plugs into the unit. Typically, those are on the top, and it doesn't matter. You usually want to use channel 1 more so. These are only going to fit in one way. So they've got the notch on one side. Make sure you fit them in, make sure they go in all the way. With your electrodes, you want to make sure that you are handling the electrodes by the pigtail here. You don't want to be holding anywhere in through here, because if you pull these pigtails out, which can happen fairly easily, then you're going to end up rendering the electrodes useless. So we want to make sure that we push these all the way in together so that there is no metal showing. Sometimes new electrodes will be a little stiffer, and you need to make sure that they're in all the way. For the electrodes themselves, these are reusable, so you're going to peel them off. You're going to save the plastic part here, because when you're done with the patient, you're going to take them off and you're going to put them back on here and store them inside the bag. They need to be stored inside their bag to help keep them a little fresher. You're only going to use one set of reusable electrodes per patient. You're not going to reuse them on someone else. After about 4 or 5 uses, sometimes they don't stick as well, so what can happen, you can take the electrodes off, just wet your fingertip, rub the top of the black part, the gel part, with water, allow it to dry for a few seconds, and it will stick much better. So when we're done, we're going to put these back onto here. Let's review the types of settings that you can have for the unit. And in this particular unit, you can see that we have our on-off button, and then you have the mode and a timer if you want to set a timer. And then we have pulse width, and we also have pulse rate. And these are your intensity up and down buttons as well. So when we turn this particular unit on, there are several different settings that you can have. And you can see that very first thing we're going to do is look at the continuous setting. If we change mode, it's going to go to modulating, SD1 and 2, we'll talk about those in a minute, burst, and continuous. So continuous is usually where we're going to start. Remember that we have the different types of settings. So we have the high frequency or conventional TENS, and our frequencies can be anywhere from 80 to 120, or even up to, I know our initial summary that we had said 80 to 110. We can also go up from 80 to 120 and have a lower pulse duration. How we're going to change those is by using that pulse width and pulse rate. So right now our pulse width, as you can see, in microseconds. If I decrease that, this is going to go down by 10, and the lowest it goes is 10. And the highest it's going to go for us is up to 250. So for the most part, on conventional tens, we want to be, let's say, in that 50 for pulse width, and then our pulse rate, we can change that. And in this particular case, the highest that we can go, oh, there it changed again for me, is 200. And the lowest it'll go is 1, because I've already done this, so you probably want to check to see how low that they can go. This particular unit, again, is going up by 5s. So you can't do like 122 hertz. So conventional tens, I'm going to keep it here. Now, acupuncture or low frequency tens is going to be the opposite. I'm going to have that higher number. So now my frequency is going to be from 1 to 10, and my pulse duration is going to be over 150. So in this case, if I change this pulse width up to 150, and I'm going to change my pulse rate down, let's put it at 10, or at 20, 10, yep, sorry, it goes up, changes. So that's going to be acupuncture or low frequency tens, not as comfortable. Remember that the brief intense is a combination of the two. So my pulse duration is going to be high, but my pulse, or I should say my pulse width is going to be high, and so is going to be my frequency. So that is how we can use the different settings on here. If we change the mode, I want to actually go to burst first. So burst, again, we can control, but you can see it defaulted back to 50 and 120. You can set these again for the acupuncture tens, but for burst, it's going to be on for 2.5 seconds and off for 2.5 seconds. So this is why it's really, really important to have your instruction booklet and to read through it, because your instruction booklet is going to share with you what each of these settings are. And you can see right here, it talks about the different settings. I'm trying to get it so you can see there. The cycled burst, the strength duration, and so forth. And it will even tell me 2.5 seconds on, 2.5 seconds off. Every unit's going to be different, so you really need to know what's going on there. Going back to this particular unit, we can then change the mode once again. And let's put it up to modulating pulse width. So if we modulate the pulse width, whatever the pulse width that we set it at, now we can set it higher. It's going to decrease by 45%, and then it's going to come back up over a certain period of time. Remember, we want to use modulation to help reduce accommodation within a patient. So we can modulate pulse width, we can modulate pulse rate. So now instead of the pulse width changing, the pulse rate's going to go up and down. We can modulate both. In this particular case, again, reading your instruction booklet, what happens is the pulse width will modulate first, and then the pulse rate will change. So they're not occurring simultaneously. They're going to alternate between how they're changing. Then as we go to strength duration, and some of these units will have a strength duration curve, some will not. And the reason for it is with research, they found that using strength duration curves can really help to achieve greater results with the TENS units. And in this particular case, so what happens in a strength duration is 3 things are occurring at the same time. The pulse width is changing, I believe in this case up to 45%. The pulse rate is changing up to 50%, but then the amplitude also changes up to 13%. So as the pulse width goes down, the amplitude is actually increasing. So you've got three things that are modulating all at the same time. And again, this will really confuse the nerve so that the nerves stay engaged throughout this process and they can't have accommodation. So we have two strength duration curves in this particular unit. We've got strength duration 1 and we've got strength duration 2. And strength duration 2 changes it. I think it goes up to 60% for the width and 90% for the rate. And it also changes the intensity a little bit more as well. So typically you do want to start off with the continuous settings with your unit and have the patient feel what the different ones are like. But typically when I'm training someone on how to use one of the TENS units is I will change the different settings and I will go in a modulating setting, strength duration if they have it, and find out what feels best for the patient. Because if the patient is going to get some good results and good outcomes, then they're going to use it. So it's going to be whatever works best for the patient, and that's how you need to set it. Remember, we can use a plug-in unit for TENS as well as the handheld units. So under electrotherapy, our waveform is going to be an asymmetrical biphasic waveform. We're going to press that. It's going to pop up with defaults for electrode side, continuous, frequency, burst mode, frequency mode, and so forth. Here's our time over on the side. So cycle time, we can do on off. Amplitude modulation, so remember we talked about different modulation. You can set that yourself for 40, 60, 80, or 100% off, on or off altogether. We can do, here's our phase duration, which is basically our pulse width. Should have been using pulse duration before. So that's going to go up or down in tens. So for high frequency tens, we're going to put our frequency up higher. These are going up and down by ones. So we can use a 40 or a 60 microsecond phase duration and 120 for the frequency. If we want to do burst, we would set the burst at what settings, and you can see then we lose the possibility to have a frequency modulation. It's automatically going to pop up to channel 1 over here. That's important to note because sometimes people will plug the electrodes into the wrong channel and then they can't figure out why the patient isn't feeling anything. And of course we're going to set down our time here. And if you're going to be doing the different types of TENS settings, this is where you would make those changes.